Hi everyone and welcome to Easy Learning. Today we are going to cover types of measurement as part 54 of our ABAt exam preparation series. We will be covering different types of measurement. Basically we will covering the ways we can measure behavior, and these include frequency, event recording, duration, time, sampling, interval, partial interval and latency. Starting with frequency event recording, what it measures, how many times a behavior occurs. So frequency is what? It is the number of counts. How many times? Frequency, how many times? You have to remember just these 3 to 4 words. Frequency, number of counts. Frequency, how many times? So basically it measures how many times a behavior occurs. So when to use it for behaviors with a clear beginning and end, because you are counting the number, you have to use it for the behaviors with clear beginning and end. For example, number of times a child raises their hand. So like if a child is continuously crying again and again and again without any gap, there is no number of counts, there is no beginning and end. You cannot use frequency for that. You have to use it for clear beginning and end behaviors. Another example could be counting how many times a student calls out during class, which is similar example. Now duration is what? It is for how long the behavior lasts. Frequency was number of count, duration is how long the behavior lasts. When to use it, you can use this type of measurement for behaviors that occur for varying length of time. Again, we were talking about the example of crying. Taking the example of tantrums here or on task behavior. For these behavior we can use duration. We can measure how long the behavior is lasting. Example, recording the time a child spends engaged in a task. Latency. Latency is the time between a given stimulus and the start of the behavior. So it is the time when the instruction has been given and the instructions are being followed. So you ask student to put out their notebook from their bag. You have given an instruction. The time will start for measuring latency, and the time period in which the students have put their books out, you will count that. You will stop measuring the latency. So the time taken for an instruction to be followed would be the latency. Now latency can be high for some kids and it can be low for some kids. Like for example, if a teacher is giving instructions to many students in a class, some of them follow it immediately, some of them follow it gradually. That would be their latency. When to use this? When you want to know how long it takes to respond to a prompt or instruction. Example is measuring how long it takes a student to begin working after being asked. Time sampling. So time sampling itself is not a measurement style, it is a broader category and it includes multiple interval based methods. You observe the behavior at specific times rather than continuously. So there are two types of behavior. So there are two types of So there are two main types of measurement. One is continuous measurement and one is discontinuous measurement. For continuous measurement, you have to observe the behavior continuously without any gap or delay. But for incontinuous measurement, you divide the time into different samples, into different intervals, and that's how it is called as time sampling, sampling the time. Now the first time sampling is whole interval recording. As the name indicates, whole interval. So the time samples you have made, the intervals you have made, you will be recording the behavior during the whole time sample. So if the behavior is occurring throughout the entire interval, you will mark the behavior as yes. Yes, that the behavior occurred in whole time period, in whole interval. This would be whole interval recording. Example include marking yes only if the child stayed seated for the entire 10-second interval. So you basically divided the time into different intervals. Interval was of 10 seconds. You will mark yes in that interval if the child has done that behavior during the whole interval without any stopping. Partial interval recording. It is whether a behavior occurs at any time during the interval. So the interval is same, but if it is not even occurring for the whole time, it has occurred at any time during the interval, you will mark it as yes, because you are doing what? You are doing partial interval recording. You will be marking behavior occurring any time during the interval. This is used for high frequency or brief behaviors. Example, if a student screamed once during a 10-second interval, you will record yes. Momentary time sampling. Momentary time sampling is when the behavior is occurring at the very end of the interval. So for momentary time sampling, you will mark the behavior only if it is happening at the end of the interval. This is used for estimating behavior over time with less observation burden. So you have to avoid observing during the whole time interval. Even for partial recording, you need to see the whole interval. You need to observe during the whole interval to check if the behavior is occurring at any time. But for momentary time sampling, if even if the behavior is occurring at the very end, you will mark it as yes. So if your sample is of 30 seconds, if your interval is of 30 seconds, you don't have to look for the whole 30 seconds. You will look up every 30 seconds. You will look up at the very end to check if the student is doing the task or not, and that will be your momentary time sampling. Coming towards the MCQs, which type of measurement records how many times a behavior occurs? Frequency, event recording. What does duration recording measure? How long a behavior lasts? Which recording method requires the behavior to occur during the entire interval to be marked as occurring? Whole interval recording. When using partial interval recording, when do you mark the behavior as occurring? If the behavior occurs at any point during the interval. Latency recording is used to measure the time it takes for a behavior to begin after a prompt. That's all for today. Thank you for watching.